What might possibly make you eat a dead body? Would you ever be able to? Would you ever be able to eat the body of your dead friend? Nando Parrado was one of the players in an amateur rugby team called the Old Christians in Montevideo, Uruguay. The Old Christian team rented a plane to go to Santiago, Chile, to play a match there. As there were extra seats on the charter airplane, Nando invited his mother and his sister to come with him to Chile. Other players also invited their relatives. On 12th of October 1972, the 15 members of the amateur rugby team, along with 25 of their relatives, boarded the Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 plane. The charter airplane took off from Uruguay. Due to the horrible weather, the pilots made an emergency landing in Argentina, and they proposed the idea of returning to Uruguay. But some of the rugby players mocked the pilot for being cowards and insisted on continuing the journey. So the next day, they continued the journey towards Chile. It was Friday the 13th, Black Friday. But the young passengers laughed about it. Nobody expected that something bad was going to happen. While the charter plane was flying over the Andes mountain, the plane became covered by thick clouds. The pilots could not see well. Suddenly, a strong wind blew and the plane plunged 3,000 feet. The right wing of the plane hit the side of the mountain and crashed on a peak called Sarasella. Then they were trapped in the snow mountains for more than 2 months without anything. Imagine if you were on that plane with your friends and family members, and the plane was shaking and about to crash. What would you think that time? Would you expect to survive the crash? After the plane crashed, the survivors came round very slowly. Several minutes later, they gradually realized that they were surrounded by snowy mountains. They began to search for the other passengers, and they found out that out of the 45 passengers on the plane, 12 people had died in the crash or shortly after that. Another 5 had passed away by the next morning. Among the 27 remaining passengers, most of them had gotten injured in the crash. For example, maybe they had a broken arm or a leg. They did not have clothes or footwear for the cold weather, climbing glasses for avoiding snow blindness, or any medical supplies for injured passengers. The survivors faced more problems when an avalanche cascaded onto them on the 29th of October, and this resulted in the death of 8 other crash survivors. After the avalanche, the remaining survivors decided to climb over the mountains and search for help. They headed west, and several hours later, one of the crash survivors accidentally found the tail section of the plane. There were massive suitcases inside and next to the tail that belonged to the passengers. These suitcases contained little bits of food. They thought of sending SOS signals through the radio in the plane. However, they failed to make the radio work. As the days went by, the survivors grew weaker and weaker. They had no food. It was so cold. They started losing their balance due to no energy in their bodies, and their skin wrinkled due to the cold. Then some of them finally realized that eating the dead bodies was their only chance of survival. Kanasa, a medical student, started convincing the others that eating the dead bodies was okay as they were not people anymore. Some of the others started supporting him by telling the others, God wants us to survive and provided these bodies so that we can live. Kanasa decided that he would need to try first. He cut many slices of frozen meat from a dead body with a broken glass and then dried them in the sun. He then took a piece. He wasn't able to move his hand towards his mouth, so he forced it upwards, pushed a slice of meat inside his mouth, and forced it down his throat. Then he quickly ate some snow to wash it down. Gradually, more and more people started eating the human flesh, but with a great feeling of wrongdoing in the beginning. They started by eating the dead bodies of the plane crew members who were strangers to them. Then they eventually ate their dead friends. With the passing of time, they started becoming more and more used to eating dead bodies. The remaining survivors buried the dead ones under the snow to prevent rotting. They used to cut the next dead body only when they were finished eating the previous one. There were fixed proportions of meat that everyone could eat. Everyone was divided into groups, and they cut the bodies together with razor blades. The survivors started eating different parts of the bodies for diversity in taste. Every one of them liked the bone marrow, but the dead bodies now started to grow scarce. Since the radio signal didn't work, they realized that the fittest people would have to cross the mountains and search for human presence around the Andes. The people who were selected to search for rescuers could eat more meat than the others as they needed more energy. Before leaving, Nando Parrado, who was one of the search party members, told some of his friends that he would understand if they ate his mother and sister as the food was becoming scarce. Then the search party left and they walked in the snow for many days. They used the skin from the dead bodies to make insulated socks to protect their feet from freezing. They found some blankets in the tail of the plane before, so they sewed them together and slept together in their big sewed sleeping bag at night. They eventually found a river, and by following it, they reached the end of snow line. On the 9th day of hike, while they were resting in the woods, they noticed a man on a horse on the other side of the river. They shouted and got his attention. The message about their survival was sent out, which came as a shock to their close ones, who had already given up hope after the plane had disappeared in the Andes for more than 2 months earlier. Finally, the survivors waiting in the mountains were rescued 4 days before Christmas. The survivors were welcomed like heroes to their countries, and they finally reunited with their family and relatives.